Hello and welcome everybody to another edition of Random Fandom. I'm your host Mayhem. This is my show where I like to riff on everything going on in the world of pop culture, things in the world of movies, video games, comic books, and my all-time favorite thing, if you bounce around my channel at all, you know, is comic books, and we are in the age of the modern comic book movie. All kinds of comic book movies out there nowadays. We got like almost 10 a year coming out, and just had the latest installment of the Marvel Cinematic Universe came out into theaters, Captain America 2: The Winter Soldier. And it occurred to me that throughout all the time that I've been doing Random Fandom, and I've done a number of movie reviews, I've never reviewed a film from the Marvel Cinematic Universe yet. So this is going to be my first time doing that. I can't believe I've never gotten around to reviewing a Marvel Cinematic Universe film, but this is going to be my first one of those. So this is going to be my review of Captain America 2: The Winter Soldier. Be forewarned, there will be spoilers a-coming, so if you haven't seen the movie yet and you don't want any major plot points ruined, I advise you to wait on seeing my review, go see the movie first, because there are some stuff that is kind of surprises that come out throughout the course of the movie, and I don't want to give any of that away for you if you're wanting to be surprised by it when you go see the film yourself. So here's my review of Captain America 2: The Winter Soldier. I'm going to start off saying that I have not really disliked any of the films in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Marvel Cinematic Universe being the specific Marvel films that are being made by Marvel Studios. Anything in the Avengers category are Marvel Cinematic Universe. So that means that the X-Men movies don't count because they're owned by Fox. That means that the Spider-Man movies don't count. They're owned by Sony. Fantastic Four doesn't count. Those are owned by Fox. No, this is specifically the Iron Man, the Captain America, the Thor, all the Avengers stuff is in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And I've loved all of them to one degree or another. I don't have complete rose-colored glasses. I realize Iron Man 2 had its flaws. I realize that Iron Man 3 wasn't as amazingly good as Iron Man 1. But overall, I have never really completely disliked any of them. They all have some good stuff, and mostly that comes because I have been waiting for a contiguous cinematic comic book universe my whole life. I mean, as a big-time reader and lover of the comics, you know, the comics are all interconnected. Even the ones that are sort of just one character off on their own doing their own little thing, they always tend to cross over with other characters, even for just an issue or two. So the larger comic universe has always been interconnected. So it would just irritate me when we'd have, you know, a Spider-Man movie and an X-Men movie, and never the twain shall meet. They're both supposed to be taking place in New York, and it's like, at the same basic times, like, what's Spider-Man doing while the X-Men are at the Statue of Liberty fighting Magneto? What, does he not notice that big flash of light from the Statue of Liberty when Magneto was trying to turn all the world leaders into mutants from the first X-Men film? So, always just kind of wondering where were these other characters. And obviously they didn't exist in the X-Men universe because only the mutant characters exist in the X-Men universe. But I was just always wanting to see a contiguous superhero universe. And now we have that, with all of them interconnecting. I know a lot of people aren't into that. They don't care for how interconnected the movies are, because that really means you have to see all of them to get the complete picture. You know, there's stuff that is being done in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. that plays directly into Captain America, and vice versa, and of course the Iron Man movies, and even the Thor stuff. And if you don't watch it all, you're kind of left in the dark about some of it. So I realize some people aren't on board because of that, but not me. Because I'm going to see every single one of these movies anyway, and I'm going to watch every episode of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I'm going to see all of this media, so I'm not in the dark on any of it. So I love the fact that it's all interconnected. But boiling down to Captain America 2 specifically now, not talking about the larger universe, but this specific individual movie. Overall, I thought it was phenomenal. I thought it was even better than the first Captain America, which has, ever since it came out, ranked pretty high on my list of favorite comic book movies. And Captain America has long been my #1 favorite comic book character. So this one surpassed the first one in my mind. The first thing I got to talk about is Chris Evans. How could anybody potentially be better than him as Captain America? And I was not on board with Chris Evans as Captain America when he was first announced before the first movie came out. Not necessarily that I had anything against him specifically. I probably would have been against anybody, no matter who they cast in the role, because Captain America is almost so sacred to me in my mind, and such a difficult character to bring to life without him being cheesy and corny, that I didn't think anybody could do it right. I almost didn't want them to do a Captain America movie at all, even though I really wanted him in the Avengers, and I really wanted a Captain America movie. It was just beyond me how they could possibly do it well and do it correctly, and how any actor could portray that character to my satisfaction. But Chris Evans does a phenomenal job. He comes across not only as honest and sincere as Captain America is supposed to, living in a world of spies and politicians and liars, he's so honest and forthright and moral. And yet, despite all that, he doesn't come across as a cheesy, hokey Boy Scout either. Chris Evans really makes you believe that that is his character, that is his persona, and it's a genuine one. He brings a lot of sincerity to the role, which I really appreciate. So, him as Captain America is absolutely phenomenal, and a perfect actor to hinge the entire movie on. But then there's other great actors surrounding him as well, and we can talk all day about Black Widow. She's been in, 2 Marvel Cinematic Universe movies at this point prior to this, so, she's well displayed at this point. Everybody's familiar with Black Widow. Same with Nick Fury. He's been in every one of them to one degree or another, so everybody knows Nick Fury at this point. Now, I want to talk about the additions of a couple of the actors who are brand new for this movie, specifically Falcon, played by Anthony Mackie, and played very, very well by Anthony Mackie. I remember back when these movies first started going, and everybody started thinking about a potential Falcon showing up in a future Captain America movie. Everybody's like, oh, who could play the Falcon? Who would be the best choice to play a Falcon? Will Smith was the name that everybody said. So unimaginative. That's just the first name that everybody's automatically going to go to. Anytime a black character, oh, who could play? Well, Will Smith. It just seems so obvious, and not that I didn't think he could do a good job, it's just, let's think outside the box. There are other actors out there other than Will Smith. Anthony Mackie did a phenomenal job as the Falcon. Not only becoming a hero in his own right and showcasing his own abilities in this movie, but more than that, his friendship and relationship with Captain America is the bedrock of Falcon's character as Captain America's partner. Falcon is a long-standing character going all the way back into the 60s and being Captain America's partner for decades and decades, and one of his best friends all the way up to present day. So it's not so much about, oh, he's just a guy who's got a flight pack and a set of wings, and, oh, he's just going to fly around and do aerial maneuvers. No, he's Captain America's best friend, partner, and go-to confidant. And he made a really good showing of that in this movie. He was kind of the one guy who didn't see him as Captain America, but saw him as Steve Rogers. He related to him as a soldier, because he was a fellow soldier of foreign war, and so that's how he related to him, as a human being and as a fellow soldier, not as this iconic, larger-than-life superhero character. So I enjoyed Anthony Mackie's portrayal as the Falcon, and I very much look forward to seeing more of that character in future Marvel films. Another thing that was in this movie, probably more so than any of the other Marvel Cinematic films, is how they're setting everything up for the long game. And by that I mean, they introduced a lot of stuff in this movie that didn't get fully developed by the end of the movie. It's almost like it was put in there specifically because it's going to be popping up in future films and it's going to get fleshed out way further down the line. And the best example I can show of that is Agent 13, Sharon Carter. She was in this movie almost as a footnote. She was barely in it. And Sharon Carter, the character, if you read the comics, she's the niece, grandniece of Peggy Carter, Captain America's love interest back in the 40s. And she's a high-ranking agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., and she becomes Captain America's love interest in the present day. But in this movie, she was barely there. She wasn't even named as Sharon until almost the very end of the movie. Before that, she was just called Agent 13, and she was just basically put in the apartment next to Steve Rogers to babysit him, to protect him. Other than that, she was barely there. Well, she's a pretty big star, the actress playing her. She's got her own TV show, Revenge. It's in its like 3rd season. She's been in several things. She's kind of a bigger name star for a role that's only amounted to 5 minutes or less of screen time in this movie. Well, it's because they're playing the long game with her. In Captain America 3, which is already on the drawing board, already has a release date, it's gonna happen, that's when she's gonna be much more prominent of a character, you can guarantee, and that's probably when they're going to have a relationship develop between those two characters. So her involvement in this movie was really just to set up her future involvement in future movies. So playing the long game with her. Also playing the long game with Brock Rumlow, who is in this movie as kind of the henchman bad guy character. If you read the comics, you know who Brock Rumlow is. He's Crossbones. He is the Red Skull's right-hand man, and he's one of Captain America's longest-running villains. But he's almost never seen in the comics without his trademark skull mask that he tends to wear all the time. This movie set it up for him to do that. He was never in that outfit or costume in this movie, but by the end of this movie, he gets horribly scarred and burned and disfigured. He's still alive, but now, if he pops up in future movies, he's going to be having the mask to cover his burns and his scars. So playing the long game with Crossbones. And then, of course, if you stuck around and waited for the after credits or the mid-credits sequence, we were introduced to another major villain in the Marvel Universe, in Baron von Strucker. As the high-ranking member of Hydra, the guy who basically, in the comics, always ruled and controlled all of Hydra, so now he's doing that again in the movies, and he's talking about how they're going to send their costume bad guys after Captain America, basically as a distraction, while they're playing the long game with the entire world, trying to take over the entire world with Hydra. So laying the groundwork with Baron von Strucker for future Captain America movies, or potentially bleeding into the Avengers movie, because they also brought in Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch in that mid-credit sequence. Also, of course, with the long game, they didn't fully resolve Bucky's story, the Winter Soldier. He broke free of his conditioning, of his mental programming by the end of the movie, but he didn't fully remember who he was. He didn't fully remember who Captain America was. So there wasn't a lot of resolution with the Winter Soldier by the end of the film. But again, that's something to set up for the long game in the future movies. So I kind of really enjoy that they're laying the groundwork, planting the seeds for future movies and future stuff in the cinematic universe that they're going to bring to full circle later on. So those were a lot of the good things that I liked. But there were a couple of things that I thought could have been done better. And the number one thing in that regard is Robert Redford's character as Director Pierce, the head of the World Security Council. Is there anybody who watched this movie who didn't know right from the very beginning that he was going to be the bad guy? I mean, they kept trying to hide it. They kept trying to keep him under wraps as the bad guy till more than halfway through the movie. Up to about halfway through the movie, he just seems like he's Nick Fury's best friend. He's got everybody's best interest at heart. He's going to be kind of the higher-up guy who's a good guy, basically, all-around good guy, even if maybe a little misguided when he first started going after Captain America. But it wasn't until more than halfway through the movie that they finally revealed him as the bad guy. Was anybody surprised? I wasn't. I knew from watching the trailers on TV before I even went to the theater that he was going to be the bad guy. As soon as I first started reading the cast list and I saw Robert Redford, and I didn't see any other major villains' names pop up on the cast list, I knew Robert Redford was going to be the bad guy. The head guy of S.H.I.E.L.D. in charge of the World Security Agency, come on. He was so obviously going to be behind the whole thing and be the mastermind, because even though Crossbones was in there, and even though Batroc the Leaper was in there, a great little addition, by the way, those are henchman characters. You've got to have a mastermind character who's actually pulling the strings and playing the big game, not just the henchman who throws punches, but the mastermind who's in control of everything. And it was obviously going to be him. So I felt like they maybe could have cast a little bit more mystery onto who was going to be the bad guy, rather than just make it so obvious. And another thing that I wish they would have done more with was the Winter Soldier himself, Bucky. He didn't seem to come in until the movie was already really going. It's not like he popped up really early on. And once he popped up the first time, when he blew up Nick Fury's car, he kind of disappeared again until, well, he shot Nick Fury a couple scenes later at Captain America's apartment. But after that, he was gone until, almost an hour later before he popped back up again. And he didn't really become a prominent playing character until the very final sequence. So the entire subtitle of this movie is The Winter Soldier. Captain America 2, The Winter Soldier. And yet the Winter Soldier himself was almost a tertiary character. You got your primary characters of Captain America, Black Widow, and Falcon. Secondary characters of Nick Fury and Director Pierce and Crossbones. And then Winter Soldier's just kind of there. He played a prominent role towards the end especially, but it seemed like they built up that he was going to be the main focus of this movie, and then he really wasn't. And even though I know like I said before, they're setting him up for the long game and he's going to become a prominent character in future movies, his story's not done. I especially know his story isn't done because I've seen interviews with Sebastian Stan and he's talking about how he's been contracted for 6 more movies or something like that. So he's definitely going to be in it quite a bit more still to come. I just almost wish they would have included a little bit more of him, because from the previews and from my reading of the comics, I was just like, oh, Winter Soldier is going to be so awesome. I want to see that interplay between him and Captain America. And that became a subplot rather than the main plot here. Not a terrible thing, and it's something that will be dealt with in future movies. I'll get my Winter Soldier fix in future films. I know there's still more of him to come. Just almost wish they would have done a little bit more with him here in this one. But overall, I thought the movie was exceptionally good. I loved the resurgence of Hydra. In the first film, we thought that Captain America and his Howling Commandos had completely destroyed Hydra, what with the death of Red Skull, or the supposed death of Red Skull, and the elimination of his troops and everybody there in the end sequence of Captain America 1 killed all the Hydra troops. But no, we find out that over the years, Hydra has been seeping into S.H.I.E.L.D. itself, and pretty much had a stranglehold on all of S.H.I.E.L.D., and the only way to get rid of Hydra was to tear S.H.I.E.L.D. down completely. And you've got to imagine that's going to have major ramifications for the entire rest of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. S.H.I.E.L.D. has been the linking thread through all of these movies, usually by way of Nick Fury. He's been the S.H.I.E.L.D. representative primarily, but, S.H.I.E.L.D. as an organization has essentially been torn down to its bare bones, bare essentials now. So that's going to have major ramifications, and that's a great story, and it's a great way to bring Captain America into present day. Also because, the enemy was within in this one. In Captain America 1, it was very clear. Americans, good guys. Nazis, bad guys. World War II is very simplistic like that. You knew who the good guys were. You knew who the bad guys were. You bring stuff into modern day, you can't just have the bad guys as the foreign people, In the Winter Soldier comic book, Winter Soldier Bucky was being controlled by the Russians, so the Russians were the bad guys. Well, you can't really do that in today's modern world because we know we're not going to get taken over by the Russians. We know the Russians, as much as Vladimir Putin's kind of a thorn in our sides, he's not a severe threat. You know, we're not going to be seeing like Red Dawn, like Russian troops landing in our backyard and taking us over overnight. It's just not going to happen. So what does Captain America have to fight in the modern world when all the major world wars are over? Well, the enemy is within now. You know, the enemy is ourselves, and it's infiltrated our own organizations and our own personnel, and it had a stranglehold on S.H.I.E.L.D. itself. So that became a major, major threat to world peace, world prosperity. Hydra almost really destroyed the world in this one because it had seeped into S.H.I.E.L.D. itself. So I really liked that aspect of the story as well. Overall, if I had to put this on a 4-star scale, I would probably give this 3.5, maybe 4 stars. I mean, this was not as good as Avengers itself, not as good as The Dark Knight, not as good as some of the almost perfect comic book films, but this was a really, really good one. And like I said, I thought it was actually a little bit better than the first Captain America movie. So I highly recommend seeing this film. Again, if you've already seen it once, I've just saw it once earlier tonight. I can guarantee I'm probably going to see it 2 or 3 more times before it's out of theaters. So if you've seen it once, see it again. If you haven't seen it yet, well, I've probably spoiled everything for you at this point, but it's still so awesome. Go ahead and see it anyway. So I give it 2 thumbs up, 4 stars. Captain America 2, The Winter Soldier gets my seal of approval. So that's going to do it for this edition of Random Fandom. Thanks for listening. Thanks for paying attention. Message down below. Let me know what you thought of the Captain America 2 movie. What do you think of the Marvel Cinematic Universe in general? Do you like how they're playing the long game? Do you dislike it? Are you fans of all the movies, or are there some you don't care for? Just let me know what you think about the Marvel Cinematic Universe in general. And we'll see you next time on the next edition of Random Fandom.